First order of business, big time scandal. Yahoo Sports reported FBI probe into NCAA corruption identifies possible violations by basketball powers. That's the headline on ESPN. But Yahoo Sports ultimately wrote the story. Pat Ford and the crew. Let me tell you something right now. Here's the funny part about this. And I don't mean to be facetious, and I don't mean to just diminish the impact of a story like this and how it could potentially ravage college basketball. I really, really don't. Because when you consider the schools that have been implicated, Duke, North Carolina, Texas, Kentucky, Michigan State, USC, and Kansas, what are we talking about here? We're talking about Bill Self at Kansas. We're talking about Shaka Smart at Texas. Well, actually, before him, stuff happened before there. Rick Barnes was coaching there before then, because we're talking about stuff dating back to 2015 and beforehand. We're talking about John Calipari at Kentucky. We're talking about Tom Izzo at Michigan State. We're talking about Roy Williams at North Carolina. And the biggest fish of them all, ladies and gentlemen, the one and only Mike Krzyzewski at Duke University. His player, Wendell Carter, has been implicated in terms of receiving impermissible benefits. Miles Bridges for Michigan State, obviously. So we've got a lot of stuff going on here. And there's a lot of layers to this, and we'll peel away at it. But let me first say this. There's no surprise here. There's no surprise here. And by the way, it's not just because some agent was funneling money to a few athletes. Because the easy fix, the easy solution to all of this is pay the damn players. And oh, by the way, while we're talking about paying the players, can we stop walking around like the flaming hypocrites, the sanctimonious hypocrites that some of us can be in the United States of America, acting like everything is supposed to be equal and it's supposed to be an equal playing field when we know good and damn well it doesn't exist? I bring that up to say this. When I say pay athletes, guess what? If you at Duke, you might get paid. If you at Drexel, you might not. It ain't the same. Stop acting like it's the same. If you play basketball and football, you should get paid. Guess what? You don't deserve to get paid if you're swimming. You don't deserve to get paid if you're playing volleyball. Period. Those who generate revenue get some revenue. Those who don't. Why is this so complicated? It's not complicated at all. If we want to talk about parity along with as it pertains to the student athlete, how come we ain't talking about parity in terms of coaches getting paid? You think the coach at Drexel is getting paid the same as Mike Krzyzewski? You think the coach at Lehigh is getting paid the same as Roy Williams at the University of North Carolina? Hell, I'll go a step further. I'm not even sure the coach at Wichita State is getting paid the same as Bill Self an hour and a half away at Kansas. I mean, what the hell do y'all think this is? It's not about fairness. My boy Jeff Brown in Cali says it best. Fairness is a place where they judge pigs. It doesn't exist. Even though some would facetiously argue pigs do get judged at a fair. Not one I've been to, but that's neither here nor there. Metaphorically speaking, we understand exactly what my boy Jeff Brown was alluding to. Can we stop the nonsense? Stop acting like everybody's the same. You're not. And Title IX, let me bring that up to the mix, because let me be fair. Gender-wise, you're a women's basketball player, you deserve to get paid too. If you're at Tennessee, if you at UConn, if you're at Stanford, if you're at South Carolina with my girl Dawn Staley, if you're the women's basketball team at St. John's, you might not deserve to get paid as much. Get over it. Stop it. Stop the nonsense. I'm glad this story has come out, because I think it's a healthy discussion as to people waking the hell up and understanding what comes with all of this. Ladies and gentlemen, let me be quite candid. Let me put myself on Front Street. I work at ESPN. Life is nice. I'm very, very proud of what I've been able to accomplish. I'm living a little well. Should everybody at ESPN get paid the same as me? Hell no. I'm not apologizing for that. I'm not apologizing for it. Not at all. I don't give a damn what network you at. To me, pay should go to those who produce revenue. And it shouldn't to those who don't. Period. When the Final Four, when a team gets to the Final Four, do you think they get paid the same? The teams that are the participants in the Final Four, you think they get paid the same as some scrub team that couldn't even make the tournament? Where do you think most of the money going to? Why you think programs celebrate so outwardly when they do make it? You think it's all for nostalgia and good feelings and emotions? They're getting paid. And this notion that everybody deserves the same is nonsense. That's why the NCAA has been a bunch of flaming hypocrites. They still are a bunch of hypocrites. They forever will be a bunch of hypocrites. Because you're busy trying to police fairness and equality amongst the student athletes, and you damn sure ain't exercising it amongst yourselves. You think the president of Duke is getting paid the same as the president at St. Joe's? You think North Carolina brings in the same amount of money as St. John's or vice versa? You think Creighton is the same as Georgetown? Well, maybe that's a bad example. In this day and age, it might be the same. All I'm saying is wake the hell up. Stop the madness. Grow up. There's no such thing as equality. Not when it comes to business. Those who generate revenue, get revenue. Those who don't, get to sit on the sidelines and wonder about what might have been. A little bit pragmatic, maybe a little bit cruel, but I'll be damned if it ain't true. And that's what we do here on the Stephen A. Smith Show. We speak truth. Get used to it, because damn it, it ain't changing. 888-SAY-ESPN. It's 888-729-3776. I got more to talk about with this subject, because this is just the beginning, y'all. Bodies are going to fall. I'll tell you who and tell you why in a minute. You're listening live to Stephen A., ESPN Radio.
You're listening to the Stephen A. Smith Show podcast.
Welcome back to the Stephen A. Smith Show, ESPN Radio. I thought he was actually coming on a few minutes later, but he is here right now, and I'm honored to have him. One of the preeminent voices on the sport of college basketball, my buddy. He's one of the best ever. The one and only Jay Billis. He's right here with Stephen A. What's going on, Jay? Good afternoon. How are you, man?
I am doing great, Stephen A. How are you?
I'm doing great. I'm really interested in getting your perspective on a couple of issues here. First of all, when you heard about what came down today, reported by Yahoo Sports and ultimately confirmed by ESPN, just the numerous things that the programs, Duke, North Carolina, Kansas, being implicated FBI in terms of paying players, or the agent, Andy Miller, ultimately revealing that he's paid players and implicating some players from those programs. Your instant reaction was what, Jay Billis?
Well, I had a couple. One, I'm not surprised. I mean, I'm not surprised that there's money flowing through sports. And I don't think this is just basketball. This is happening in football, too. It's just, basketball was the one that the FBI decided to look into right now. And actually, Stephen A., the person at the center of this that actually started it is a guy named Mark Blazer, who the NCAA knew about in 2010 because he was paying North Carolina football players. That's what ultimately led to the discovery of the academic issue at North Carolina. But And my other reaction was, I would like to see, even though I know that the college sports is awash in money, I still would like to see some corroboration of ledger entries. That just because something's on a ledger doesn't mean that the money actually changed hands. So in dealing with, and look, I'm not naive at this. I know that this stuff is going on. But with regard to individual cases, you've got the entire landscape. But with regard to individual cases, it is not beyond someone who's been charged with a federal crime and you think is a fraud to put something in a ledger and then say, hey, listen, I gave money to so-and-so. I want to be reimbursed. And it didn't actually happen, so the guy can keep the money. That's possible. And then you've got different levels of it, Stephen A. So there'd be, thousands upon thousands of dollars given to somebody, and then other entries that somebody had a meal, reimbursement for a meal. So was the person just at the meal? Was their meal paid for? Who knows? But I think most reasonable people would say there's a big difference between taking tens of thousands of dollars and being present and maybe having a meal paid for. Those are different things. But this is going to keep coming out, and my sense is this was a defense lawyer that let this stuff out because it's under protective order. I can't believe the government would have let this out. They usually do that within motions practice or at trial. But this stuff's going to keep coming out.
It's interesting because what I'm wondering about, Jay, is that when you see some of the names that's on the list having received some money, I mean, we're going from the Dennis Smith Jr.'s out of North Carolina State that's now with the Dallas Mavericks to a Fred VanVleet that's now in Toronto to a guy like Kyle Kuzma who's now with the Lakers. But, the list was devoid of mega big names, marquee names per se. And the mentality is that if these guys were receiving stuff, Lord knows what some of the bigger names that have sifted through college basketball have received. Is that the right kind of position or kind of feeling for folks to harbor in this day and age, in your estimation?
Well, it certainly raises the question, and I think it's a fair question to ask. It's funny, Stephen A. I'm kind of in the middle on this as to how I feel about it. I told you a little bit about how I feel, but
so am I. Yeah.
The delivery system in this has changed. The money's not changed. You can go all the way back to the 30s, 40s, and 50s where athletes were being paid, whether it was boosters or the schools themselves, and they were being paid before they got to school. They were being paid while they were in school. There's ample documentation that players at UCLA in the 60s and 70s were being paid by a booster named Sam Gilbert. It's all over the place and has been forever. This is nothing new, and it's been going on in football too. That's sort of the thing that's made me laugh about this, to the extent that this is funny in any way, is that somehow basketball is seen as this corrupt enterprise right now, and football is out selling Girl Scout cookies and helping little old ladies across the street, and that's not happening. This has been happening in football too, and before we're done here, everybody's going to blame this all on the one and done rule, and say if we could only get rid of the one and done rule, nobody would, we'd be just fine.
And do you agree with that?
I don't. I think it's totally bogus that this has nothing to do with one and done. I mean, Miles Bridges' name was in there. I have no idea what happened with Bridges and whether what's in that ledger is fair, not fair, whether it was a family member, whatever. I have no idea.
Right.
All I know is he's a sophomore, so one and done doesn't have anything to do with it. There's a whole bunch of other people you could point to in that regard. Fred VanVleet, who you mentioned, was a senior. Kyle Kuzma was a junior. So one and done has nothing to do with this stuff. This is about money, and it's about how much these guys are worth, and they're worth a ton. And while we're worried about agents in football and basketball, we're clearly not worried about agents in hockey because college hockey players are allowed to have agents.
Gotcha. Jay Billis right here with Stephen A. on ESPN Radio. Jay, I got to go a little deeper into the woods, though, as it pertains to the coaches. Your former coach, Mike Krzyzewski, Duke has been mentioned. Roy Williams, a champion. He's been mentioned. Bill Self, a champion at Kansas. He's been mentioned. John Calipari, a champion at Kentucky. He's been mentioned. In terms of their programs is what I mean by that. How concerned do you find yourself, or should the rest of us find ourselves being, due to the names of the programs that have actually been implicated in all of this?
That's a great question. I think there are two ways of looking at this that I'm interested in. One, I'm always worried because of the unreasonable fashion in which I think way too many people look at this, where if there's something that surfaces like this, where you've got maybe a kid took a few bucks or his family took a plane ticket or a meal or something, that the coach knew. He knew, absolutely knew. That kind of thing, where it's this gotcha thing about, I told you that guy was a cheater. So I worry about people being unreasonable in that regard. But the other side of it is I think with stuff like this, there's a chance that maybe people would become reasonable. And then all of a sudden you go, wait a minute, nobody could know about this stuff. It's not fair to suggest that a coach, that anyone in a position of authority knows everything. Nobody knows everything. And we have these narratives somehow that, so-and-so is hands-on. He or she knows everything. Nobody knows everything. They can say they do if they want to, or we could have that standard if we want to, but it ain't true. Nobody knows everything. And the idea that a coach is going to know what a player's parents are doing, or whether they're talking to an agent or meeting with an agent, or what their finances are, I think it was unfair for people to suggest that Pete Carroll should have known what Reggie Bush's family was doing in San Diego, a 2-hour drive away. Look, if you can implicate someone by direct knowledge or a clear, unmistakable reasonably should have known, then I'm fine with it. But some of this stuff, you worry that there's going to be an unnecessary gotcha element to it.
Well, let me transition to a different story that's right in your wheelhouse as well, that you would be acutely knowledgeable about, and that's Rick Pitino. I'm sure you saw his statement or his press conference when he spoke after the Louisville's appeal was denied, and they had their national championship taken away, their trip to the Final Four, the banner lowered from the rafters, et cetera, et cetera. You saw how defiant he appeared. This falls along the lines of what you just finished alluding to in terms of a coach not knowing everything or whatever the case may be. What are your thoughts about the Rick Pitino and that whole scandal there?
I understand exactly where Rick is coming from in trying to get his story out there and fight back the idea that he knew and was involved in that. I don't think, I have never argued that maybe he shouldn't have known. If people want to argue that he should have known all that, that's reasonable. We could have that argument. Mm-hmm. But as to whether he had actual knowledge of it, I understand why he's fighting that notion. Rick has the problem of, this is all in the backdrop, starting with he had an infidelity in his marriage. Right. That made headlines because of the blackmail aspect of it. He had to sit in the witness box and discuss, something no one would want to discuss publicly. Right. And so that's where it started. And so he's got that anchor around his neck and having to deal with this. But I would ask reasonable people to think of it this way. In the Louisville case with sort of the parties, the stripper party thing, hundreds of people were interviewed in that, including 17 and 18-year-old players that went to other schools, and they were all threatened with their eligibility. And there was never a hint in any investigation that Rick Pitino had any knowledge of that. And there were a whole bunch of people that didn't know. And I'm sympathetic to that, because it never occurred to me, Stephen A., that kind of thing could go on. I never, I've been an assistant coach. I was a grad assistant at Duke years ago, and it's been a long time. But it would never occur to me that I would have to patrol the dorms late at night and in the wee hours of the morning to make sure that something like that wasn't going on once a month or twice or 5 times a year or whatever it was. That is so far outside the bounds of reason. So you'd ask somebody in a similar position, what would you expect a person in that job to do? If do you have to patrol the dorms every night? Do you have, because I know they were monitoring social media. Nobody had any hint of this thing. And so I understand what he's doing. I would not have advised him to come out the day that the banner came down, because with the FBI investigation thing and then the stripper gate and all that stuff, I don't think he helped himself by saying anything. but I understand how he feels because I could not have imagined it.
My last question to you, Jay, is along these lines, getting back to what we were alluding to earlier with the FBI probe and what have you. And you could throw Rick Pitino into this as well, because here's my thinking. The FBI is involved now. This is not some NCAA looking to bring the hammer down on somebody. This is the Federal Bureau of Investigation. And because of that, I think when it's become a legal issue, I think you're going to find people that are going to be singing a lot more and diming folks out and talking about a lot of things that are going on in the sport of college basketball and beyond. And that's the biggest reason I think there are huge, huge concerns that should be adopted when it comes to the issue that lays before us right now. The FBI's role, what do you say about all of that? The fact that they're involved in the kind of impact they could potentially end up having in all of this, because they already have that impact.
Yeah, I think the impact is largely symbolic in a lot of ways. I mean, obviously, if you're in the crosshairs of this right now, it's not pleasant for anybody involved. But nobody's going to jail over this for a long period of time. There's not enough money involved. But I would say this, Stephen A., that take another sort of analogize this to something different. Like when Martha Stewart was prosecuted for insider trading information, not everybody who traded on inside information went and turned themselves in. Mm-hmm. And it's a similar thing here. Like this storm is going to pass, and and not one contract is going to be canceled. Not one game is going to be canceled. All the games are going to be played. They're all going to be televised. We're still going to have the tournament. All this stuff is going to keep going and keep flowing. And the question is, what are we going to do going forward? What is the NCAA going to do? Like with this commission that Condoleezza Rice is chairing.
Yep.
What are they going to come up with? Are they going to say, okay, we need some more rules and add to a 500-page rule book? And this time we'll say, well, and we really mean it, because the FBI is not going to stay on this for very long. They're not going to. They're not. This is not going to be the top of their list going forward.
Jay, I still got. I'm sorry. I still have one more question to ask you, because I'm thinking about Tom Izzo. Tom Izzo with Miles Bridges involved in this, right? Plus, you got that piggybacking off of what Michigan State obviously has been going through with OTL's report and the gymnastics coach being the despicable human being that he was and spending the rest of his life in prison, with Mark D'Antonio, the football coach, and Tom Izzo, the basketball coach, people clamoring for them to answer questions about what they knew, if anything at all, as it pertained to their players and what have you. How are you looking at Tom Izzo right now? How are you fearful that people are looking at him right now in light of the fact that Michigan State's name has been mentioned yet again for something other than just their basketball?
That's another great question, Stephen A. And this, like what we had talked about before, there's a backdrop that makes this especially difficult, and that backdrop is Larry Nassar. Like, I don't think any reasonable person is suggesting that Tom Izzo or Mark D'Antonio had anything to do with, knew, or should have known with regard to anything having to do with Larry Nassar.
Correct.
But that's the backdrop. And then there's an issue with some cases on an issue that plagues not only society, but plagues college campuses all over the country, and that's sexual assault and sexual misconduct and how those things are handled. And now you have something that's totally separate, but you have all these backdrops. And the total separate thing is did any player accept an extra benefit, and whether that's going to be an issue going forward that the NCAA is going to deal with. And, Stephen A., in these type of situations, when there's an allegation of a player having taken an extra benefit, that player will be interviewed by compliance at Michigan State or whatever institution. They're going to look into just about everything, and then if they feel like there's a legitimate question, what winds up happening is they declare the player ineligible, and then they have to petition the NCAA for reinstatement. And that stuff happens all the time. I mean, it happens every year. It happens in football. It happens in basketball every single year. It usually doesn't happen at this time of year. And so it's a little bit of an odd situation in that regard. But I don't look at Tom Izzo any differently than I always have. It's obviously a tragic situation at Michigan State. But I don't think that most reasonable people would have handled this situation any differently than Tom has, given there are multiple investigations going on, and he's going to be interviewed under oath. That's the proper forum for questions to be answered and the facts to be determined.
Jay Billis, always appreciate the great work you do, man. Keep it up, man, and thank you. Thank you for coming on the show.
Always my pleasure. Thanks for having me, Stephen A.
Thank you. The one and only Jay Billis ESPN basketball, college basketball analyst extraordinaire right here with Stephen A. on ESPN Radio. He's a lawyer by profession, by the way. Man knows what he's talking about. You want expertise on the sport of college football, particularly the legalese involving this particular situation. We were talking to the right man. 888-729-3776 is 888-SAY-ESPN. More to Stephen A. Smith Show on ESPN Radio.
Guess what? You're in the middle of the Stephen A. Smith Show podcast.
Damn it, I mean it!
Time for Straight Talk. Brought to you by Straight Talk Wireless. Best phones, best networks, no contracts. By the way, Seth Greenberg, former college basketball coach at Virginia Tech, now a college basketball analyst for ESPN. He'll be on the show with us midway through hour number 2 or so. So looking forward to having that conversation with him. NBA season stretch run began last night. All-Star break is over. Russell Westbrook hit a game-winning shot at the buzzer to beat the Sacramento Kings. LeBron James and the Cleveland Cavaliers lost to the Washington Wizards, who are 8-2 without John Wall. 8-2 without John Wall. He might need to get back. By the way, don't tell me some of those players that went to college for 1 year or whatever didn't receive some money either. We all know what time it is. I don't care what anybody says. But that's, again, a subject we can revisit for another day. Plus, spring training just opened. New York Yankees showed up about 40 minutes ago, ready to pursue a World Series championship that barely escaped them last year, that I don't believe will escape them this year. Be nice to see the Dodgers do something, but that California sunshine ultimately works against them come postseason time. I knew they were going to lose last year once I saw Yu Darvish warming up. I knew he wasn't ready for that Game 7. I just knew it. Lots of stuff to get into as the show progresses today. Stick around. Don't touch that dial. You're listening live to the Stephen A. Smith Show, ESPN Radio. Let's see. Let's go to the phones. Let's go to Augie in Long Island. You're live with Stephen A. What's up?
Stephen A., what's going on? First time, long time. How's everything, bud?
Thank you. Pick up your phone, man. You sound like my listeners here in echo. Pick up your phone. Talk clear.
Man, I'm on Bluetooth. You can't hear me? No good?
All right. Go ahead.
All right. Talk to me. So, listen, the beginning of the show, you talked about how football players, college players should be getting paid, correct?
Yeah, I just think that a lot of college players should get paid. Yes, I do.
All right. I was just thinking, with the Olympics going on, see, I don't know much about curling or anything like that, but I went on Google last night and it said, how to play. First thing that popped up was curling. Now, curling might be a bad example, but you mentioned swimming as well. Why should swimmers get paid? I'm very curious on why you think. Listen, I know football is the biggest sport. I know all that's
Let me answer the question directly. I believe any sport that generates revenue, their athletes should be paid. Period. I don't care who it is. As long as you generate revenue, you should be paid.
I agree with that. Listen,
that's all
right. I have another thing with Jay Billis. Great, thank you. Jay Billis, he talks about how hockey players have agents. Then why don't football players have agents in college?
No, that's what he was advocating. He was simply saying that people would turn around and they talk about agent participation and they'd lament that. He said, yet in hockey, they do have it. So he was implying, to my understanding, that we sneeze at it in some sports, but just let it fly by us in others. Like, for example, you talk about one and done and how this is an issue, and people point to that being an issue because these guys are coming into the draft, et cetera, one and done and all of this other stuff. Baseball players can get to go to college or they can go to the minor leagues. They have options. They have choices. Hockey players, they can have agents, okay? But your football or basketball player, it's suddenly problematic. How does that make any sense? He's right about that.
It does not.
All right? Got to run. I appreciate the call, buddy. Thank you so much. Let's go to Morris in Memphis. You're live with Stephen A. Go ahead.
Yeah, how you doing, Stephen A?
I'm all right. Real quick. Go ahead, buddy.
Yeah, I just said that I really don't feel like the players should get paid, but what I do feel like that they should get is like a per diem, and also I feel that they should get some type of like disability plan, because what if a player get hurt in college and he can't make it to the NBA or to the NFL, and they should have something there for those players who might get hurt. They don't make it in the draft. Or
Let me be very clear. I believe that sports with players who generate revenue should receive some kind of monetary compensation. Whatever way you want to choose it, stipend, per diem. Well, I'm not getting into the minutia of it all. There should be some kind of monetary compensation for their services. That is my belief. Period. Appreciate the call. Straight Talk Wireless, nationwide coverage on America's largest and most dependable 4G LTE networks. Lots of stuff to get into. You got a lot of people that have their thoughts about whether or not athletes should be paid. I have no problem with those who generate revenue getting paid and those who don't not getting paid. That's just me. Sleep on that a minute. But make sure if you do, you try Zeepa. It's the only snoring solution of its kind. If you or someone you know snores, you need to get a Zeepa. Zeepa is truly a game changer, y'all. Listen, I used to be just like you and wake up tired because I was snoring all the damn time. But that was before I started using Zeepa. Now I wake up feeling great every day. So when you get great sleep, you feel better, you have more energy. Now, please don't be fooled by imitators because there's only one Zeepa. The way you can tell if it's a legitimate Zeepa is the tongue strap, and it's on Zeepa.com. So go to ZYPPAH.com. That's Zeepa, ZYPPAH.com. It's time to take control of your sleep. Again, Zeepa is only available on their website, Zeepa.com. And it's the only one with the patented tongue strap that's been proven to work. So go to ZYPPAH.com. That's Zeepa.com and get the great sleep you need and deserve. More with Stephen A. on ESPN Radio in a minute.
Guess what?
You're in the middle of the Stephen A. Smith Show podcast.
Damn it, I mean it!
ESPN Radio is presented by Progressive Home Insurance. Getting a quote is easier than ever before. Welcome back to Stephen A. Smith Show, ESPN Radio. Number to call up, as always, is 888-729-3776. That's 888 say ESPN. Put my numbers on the board. Put my callers on the board, please, so I can see this, please. Listen, we'll get into more of it with Seth Greenberg, more of what's happening in college sports or whatever. But I got to tell you something. When you see names like Duke, North Carolina, Michigan State, I don't know what to say. I really, really don't know what to say. I'm telling you right now, it's not a good look. I'm telling you right now, it's problematic. And there's simply no way around it. That's Mike Krzyzewski. That's Roy Williams. That's John Calipari. That's Tom Izzo. And Bill Self. What else is there to say? You try to ignore it all you want to. Won't work. Just won't work. I remember when Rashard McCants dimed out North Carolina talking about how tutors went to classes for the students and how there was bogus classes on the transcript and what have you. It's a problem. And you have folks in North Carolina hissing at them and calling them a snitch. People talk about wanting the truth. You really don't want it. You want the truth about everybody else, but not about yourself. Not when it's going to compromise the success of your program, your favorite program. People don't talk about that, but it's the absolute truth. And let me tell y'all something right now. Domino's going to fall. I don't care what anybody says. I heard Jay Billis loud and clear, but I think that whether it's Rick Pitino or somebody else, you're going to have cats snitching and really doming out folks. They ain't going down alone. FBI's involved. And I think they're coming for blood. I really, really do. Hour number 2 up next. Got some NBA stuff to get into. And more. Stick around. You're listening live to Stephen A. on ESPN Radio.
That's just a sample of what you'll hear on the Stephen A. Smith Show. Weekdays at 1 p.m. Eastern on ESPN Radio and the ESPN app.